Mhm.
Hello, welcome back to another week of Let's Discuss with Meg Duke, where we discuss some things perinatal and all things mental health. This week, I have been building up to this. I have been mentioning that I was going to have somebody on, and this person is finally here. I am so excited for it. Ileana Martinez, a registered dietitian, a certified diabetes care and education specialist. She has a master's in public health with a concentration in health promotion and behavioral science. She's been an RD for 7 years, and for the last 6 has been working with kids, pregnant people, and adults. She's also a mom of 2 under 2, a 22-month-old boy, and an almost 6 months girl. So everybody, please welcome Ileana.
Hi.
Hi. Oh my gosh. I'm so excited. And you know what else I'm excited to? I do DM a lot of people, and that's the answer to this question, but I'm excited because I actually we have a more fun answer to this question. Ileana, how do we know each other?
Well, I think we have a friend in common. She's a dietitian. I believe we used to work together. I mean, we worked together with her, but separately.
Yes.
And yeah, that's how we.
Yeah, absolutely. So I used to live in Houston. We used to work together at a community health center, which is so exciting and so many memories and so much fun. But yes.
Yes.
Wonderful. So how did you decide what spoke to you and you were like, registered dietitian is the way I'm going?
To be honest, there's no really like fun story about this. I was already a senior in high school and I didn't know what I wanted to do. So when I started college, I decided to take an intro to nutrition course, and I just fell in love with human metabolism, how vitamins work, and health, and just the importance of having good nutrition, which is way more complex than at the beginning I thought it would be, and it's really interesting. So I'm glad I chose nutrition. It's a pretty fulfilling career, and you get to do a lot. You get to work in different settings if you want to, or have your own private practice. There's so many things you can do with nutrition. So I'm really happy I chose that. I'm really happy with my career.
Yes, absolutely. And you're right. There's so much science behind it. Like, and it's been interesting too. You mentioned how vitamins work. I'm not, we're already off on a tangent. Like, that's so interesting to me because I hear different things about different vitamins and like, does most of it come out in your pee? Is it what it's expensive? It makes your pee expensive. That's the joke or
Yeah.
whatever. And there are ones that actually do work. And how do what has your experience been with that? Like recognizing the right vitamins to take and how the ones that are helpful.
Yeah, well, it's very individualized, and
Sure.
it's going to depend a lot on, if the person's deficient, if you're noticing symptoms. I think lab work would be the first way to go and be like, for example, a lot of people are deficient in vitamin D.
Mhm.
So, I would recommend getting labs. And if they are deficient, then starting taking a supplement. But just taking a multivitamin and all these vitamins, really, it's not necessary. As a dietitian, I would focus on diet first, on nutrition, and making sure you're eating a varied diet and getting different nutrients from the foods, and then maybe supplementing a certain few. But really, especially with kids, a lot of parents ask, like, do I need to give them multivitamins? And a lot of times you don't, but it's gonna depend on the person, on the child,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
if they need.
Wonderful. I mean, it's so helpful to know that. Um, because yeah, I mean, who knows, but the diet is really the piece which we're going to get into, of course. So very excited to go there as well. But so I know you mentioned, I mentioned in your intro that you've been doing it for 7 years, but then the last 6 that you've really been focusing on working with children and pregnant people. How did that come about?
Well, at the clinic that I work, there were different departments. I was the only dietitian there, and there was adult medicine,
Mhm.
OBGYN, and then pediatrics. So I would get referrals from all those departments, and I was seeing a lot of kids on a daily basis. So really, it's just my job was seeing adults, pregnant women, kids. But I think I would see more kids than adults
Mhm.
um, at some point. So that's how I started working with children.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. And so with that kind of with your experience that's been working with kids and their parents, what are some of the biggest misconceptions you've noticed parents have, like the bad information we're getting or the stories we're telling each other about feeding little ones?
Yeah, I think we get a lot of information from either especially when we're starting solids and we're first-time parents, for example, we get information from the internet, from our pediatrician, from our parents, friends, and a lot of times it can be conflicting information. One of the biggest maybe misconceptions can be like when to start solids. If you were speaking starting solids, it's like, is it a 4-month, 6 months? And really it's going to depend on the kid, if they're meeting their developmental milestones, if they're ready to eat, because there's no specific age, right? Like, for example, my almost 6-month-old is gonna, almost at that age when we're introducing solids, but I don't think she's quite there yet, so I'm gonna wait a little bit. But with my son, it was different. Like at 6 months he was ready. So it all depends on the child, and not necessarily on an age. If you feel like maybe your pediatrician told you at 4 months, but that your kid is not ready, they're not sitting up mainly unassisted, or they don't have a lot of support in the neck, then they're not ready. So that's one, like the age. And then a lot of times also we don't know which food to introduce first. We're told maybe rice cereal, to introduce like baby foods. And well, as a dietitian, I would discourage people from parents starting with rice cereal, just because it's not very, nutrient dense.
Yes, sure.
It's fortified with iron. That's why they recommend it, because babies need those foods rich in iron. But those are fortified cereals that are high in arsenic, and that's why I discourage parents to starting with those, with the rice cereal, because of the arsenic and the risk of, increasing the chances of cancer in the future. So, I recommend starting with whole foods, real foods. It can be pureed, it can be baby-led weaning, whatever you feel more comfortable with, as long as, you're introducing those real foods first.
Nice. Okay, that's good to know. And that is good to know about, possible cancer link implications. I mean, the things that we don't know.
Yeah.
Wow, that's scary. And I like what you were saying too about like it doesn't have to follow an age chart, because I do feel like so many times so many developmental milestones, eating or otherwise, especially with the little tiny babies, is like age. At 4 months they're supposed to do this, at 6 months they're supposed to do this, at whatever it might be, and then you get to that point and only your child the most. And so I love that you're able to say like, oh, my son, done, 6 months, here we go. My daughter, we're gonna wait a little bit. And awesome, because what people don't ask when you're doing a college admission application is, when did you start eating solid foods?
Exactly. So there's no rush. Some kids take longer, and that's okay. But also keep in mind, if baby's already 7, 8 months and not wanting to eat foods, then that will be kind of like a red flag. Something to mention to your pediatrician, because they should be eating. So it's not too early, not too late, but just being, mindful of those milestones and noticing your kid, how they're doing, if they're ready or not. But yeah, it's very individualized with each children, even siblings.
And very important then to communicate with your provider of, oh, this is the suggestion from my provider, but saying like, I don't necessarily feel like they're ready. Great. Okay, now we are trying. Now they're not interested, whatever it might be, and letting them know, and then kind of being able to make that choice, kind of moving from there.
Exactly. Like you get to make that choice because the doctor may not know, your child very well. And it's not like a rule that you have to start at 4 months or 6 months. It's you that get to decide, based on what's best for your child.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. I love that. And so it's funny though, because I even participated in this. So I will acknowledge, when I sent you kind of a list of questions, I was going to ask like, what are some of your biggest encouragements for parents who are starting out feeding their little ones at 6 months? Because that lives in my brain rent free, 6 months. So whatever age it may be that people are starting there, what are some of the biggest encouragements that you have for people, the things that you've found that have been very helpful? I know it's such a nervous making time, like choking and gagging and spitting and all of that, and food allergy, all the things. So what are some things that you found have been very helpful and encouraging?
I think just being prepared. I recommend taking a course, a CPR course. That way you feel like, you're ready. You're not starting this, not knowing anything. CPR, I think it's, important. And then just doing whatever feels more comfortable with you. For example, I thought I was going to do baby-led weaning with my first, and then I was a little scared, so I did a combination of both. I did like purees and then baby led weaning, and that's fine. That worked for both of us. But having resources, knowing a little bit more, like doing your own research from experts, and maybe know like, okay, I want to start with real foods that are high in iron, like for example beef and chicken, because some parents may associate those foods as those are like grown-up foods, not baby foods, right?
Sure, sure.
And you can introduce them however you want to. You can puree the ground beef, or add some like mashed sweet potatoes or something to make it easier to swallow. But just like getting that information, knowing that food in the first year, I think they say it's just for fun or something like that, like food in the first year. And it's kind of true, because we're not expecting the child to eat a lot at the beginning, but it is important to introduce nutrients. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to give it just rice cereal just because it's food and whatever, right? So it is important to know that they need nutrients. So offering those foods, and then letting your child guide you and not have these high expectations, because then we can become frustrated, like they're not eating, and it's just like, it's a new experience for them. It's going to be different from your kids, and it's not going to be the same for all your kids. But letting them really guide you, and that way you don't feel so stressed and you're prepared. Something that helped me was to follow a dietitian. I don't know if you've heard of her. She's Katie Ferraro. She has a podcast. I think the podcast, Baby Led Wean Team, or that's the Instagram, but I think the podcast is Baby Led Weaning Made Easy. So yeah, I would just listen to her on my way to work, and hear like, she recommended watching videos of kids gagging. That way, when it happens to your kid, because it's going to happen, you know what to do. You're not scared.
Yes.
Not... yeah.
Okay, I love that. And it's like immersion therapy a little bit.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I'm going to watch this. We know the outcome is good because no one is posting videos of something terrible happening. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Kind of like desensitizing yourself to that a little bit can be very helpful. I wouldn't have even thought of that, but it does. It makes so much sense. And I like the idea, kind of lowering your expectations, realizing like this is not where the nutrients are coming from. It's play, it's new, it's texture, it's learning. I think sometimes we forget, and obviously we know this, but we don't really think about it and conceptualize like, this is the first time this human has ever experienced something like this. It's the same with like toilet training. Like for us, of course, the idea of, a bowel movement in our pants would be yucky, but like, that's all they know. And so for them, it's not uncomfortable yet. So here's the same thing. Like all I know is a bottle or a boob or whatever else it might be, whatever your combinations are. And so it's like, that's brand new information, shocking, yes. World changing. So it's like letting them have that time to really process and kind of slide into that gently is important.
Yes, exactly. Like with my first, I knew this, but then as a mom, I was expecting him to like put all this food in his mouth and get all dirty. And he wasn't doing that. He was just barely touching the food. And then I was thinking, maybe there's something wrong. But no, like he's just learning, he's touching something new. He's learning to bring that food to his mouth. So everything's normal. But yeah, like kind of lowering, or don't have so much expectations when it comes to feeding, because like you said, they're learning. It's something completely new.
Absolutely. Oh gosh, I love that. I love that a lot. It's very helpful, kind of going in with the appropriate expectations, because I think I will admit I did that, and also too, my two kiddos couldn't have been more different as well. They're almost exactly 2 years apart. My son ate basically everything we put in front of him, except avocado, which Diana was very upset about. I was like, so was I, honestly. But then he likes avocado. He got into it. My daughter wouldn't eat. To save her life, she would not eat food. It was so and it was stressful, and it was like, and I knew that it was not for nutrients, and I also it's all very difficult, but it is nice at least to go in with the headspace of trying to have those appropriate expectations. Again, dare I say, lowered expectations. Yes. Where it's like, it's all okay, and let's just kind of see how this goes. Absolutely. So then when we move into the toddler stages and the food does start to become some the nutritive substances and more important, what are some of the biggest encouragement that you have for parents, with the peaks and valleys of a child's willingness to eat? Because again, we could have that conversation over here as well.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's completely normal for toddlers to have those days. Some days are going to eat pretty well, other days their appetite is not going to be, high, so they're going to eat very little or just particular foods that they like, and that's completely fine. It's just like with us. Sometimes we have appetite, sometimes we don't feel like eating certain stuff. But again, in when I was working with families, I would tell the parents about Ellen Satter. I don't know if you're familiar with her. She's
No.
an she's an author. She's a specialist in family feeding, and she invented the division of responsibility, which is the parent decides the what, the when, and the where, and the child decides the how much and whether if they want food or not. So having that division of responsibility takes a lot of the pressure away, because you did your job, focusing on the what, like what you're gonna give your child. You decided to give avocados and berries and some ground beef, and then it's the responsibility of the child, your toddler, to decide what they want to eat from those foods and how much, whether they want food or not. Right.
Yes.
So that's really, as a parent, what we can do, just making sure we're bringing in healthy foods and cooking those foods and having like timed meals, right? Having like a schedule so they can anticipate when the next meal is going to come, and having like I do recommend, as much as possible, having the family eat together. I know it's sometimes really hard when both parents are working, but if it can be once a week, it has a lot of benefits when the whole family sits down and eat together. And for the child also to be sitting down while they're having a snack or eating, it's also very important.
Okay, so yeah, so that's a big thing too, is even for a snack, not running around the playroom, but sitting and focusing on what's the task at hand, which would be eating.
Exactly, and not having the TV as a distraction, but having that time to bond with your family, talk, and then the child to get their time to eat and enjoy the food. Make it a pleasurable experience and not a very stressful experience by asking them like, "Hey, finish this or eat that," because then we're not following those responsibilities. We're like, either making them finish the meal whenever they don't want to, and they're pretty good at regulating their appetite. So for children, I don't recommend pushing their child to eat everything off the plate, or I would get a lot of referrals for overweight, or high BMI. And on the other side, I wouldn't recommend a parent for a child to, tell them, "Hey, stop eating. That's way too much," or like, "You're done," or like serve, smaller portions that their siblings. I do
Sure.
not recommend that, like, at all.
Sure. Sure. I love that because I know my husband and I have this conversation. Actually, it was funny that you mentioned too. We don't do a lot of TV in my house, but sometimes, and my son, he's 3.5, and he loves an opportunity to watch a movie while we eat dinner. And so that generally works for him. Sometimes we'll have to be like, "Buddy, you haven't had a bite in a little bit," but generally he's fine. My daughter does not do well away from the table. Like my husband will take her upstairs and eat with her, and I'll watch my son, or vice versa, because she needs to be at the table. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that, like, from an anecdotal standpoint of like, that's right over here. Yes, the TV is quite a distraction, or being at the table, the physical, the being there and knowing where you're supposed to be. I'm at the table, I'm supposed to be eating, is really helpful. And then I
Yeah.
also, like, my husband had that conversation about like a happy plate, I guess is what he had heard growing up, or maybe he read it in a book somewhere or whatever, I don't know. But like a clean plate is a happy plate or whatever. And I was like, I see that if the kiddos are like, "Give me 75 sausage links," which we would never give them 70, but
Uh-huh.
I'd like 7. Like, what if we start with 3 and then see if you're still hungry? But there's a difference if they ask for it. But even then, I don't want them to feel forced and overfed. But certainly, if we plop food on their plate, making sure that we don't have the expectation of like, "And you will finish that, you will clean that plate off," because that can really be damaging emotionally, mentally, certainly physically. Like, I feel stuffed and overfull.
Yeah.
So that's good to, I really appreciate you sharing that. It's such a good thing. It's, parenting, right? It's always something that we're thinking about.
Yeah, and eating habits starts young. So if they start
Yes.
associating like, oh, I have to finish everything that's on my plate, they're going to start ignoring those satiety signals, right? Their hunger and satiety signals are not going to know, and they're going to grow up to be adults that don't know when to stop or really have difficult time listening to those
Yes.
cues just because they ignored it for so long.
Yes. Oh, satiety signals. That is such a good way of looking at that too. And if you don't mind, you're not my therapist, we don't have to get into this, but also trigger warning. I do have a binge eating disorder, and that's my biggest fear. Because I don't have any, I guess I don't have satiety signals. It's like I'm stressed out or emotional, somebody get me a bacon cheeseburger. And so that's my biggest fear, is to pass that along. And so I'm trying to be very mindful about how I approach conversations about food, a view of food, not having that diet culture of like, oh, that's fattening, or whatever. It's like we talk about, you need a healthy carb, and you need a protein, and you need like veggies and fruits, and no keto lifestyle over here for the kids or anything.
Yeah, no, it's really important. And I didn't think about this when I started working with kids until I started noticing a pattern that, okay, these kids are being referred, especially not really toddlers, but maybe, I don't know, 6 years and older. They're being referred for high BMI, right? And then they hear their doctor, their pediatrician say, oh, they're overweight, or they use the word obese, right? And the child listens to that. And the parent, they want to do what's best for their child, but maybe they take a wrong approach. And they're like, okay, we need to go on a diet. And everything starts going downhill from there. Because I see kids and they're afraid to eat. And then they maybe get bullied at school because of the weight. And then a few years later, like I worked there for 6 years, and I would see them like a few years later, and now they're being referred for eating disorders because they're, since they were little, they were being told, hey, stop eating, or the parents would hide food. And I always tell the parents, like, first, I don't recommend labeling foods as good or bad. Like there's a ice cream, like, no, that's, for special occasions, or like, that's bad, that's fattening, because then the kid learns to associate bad. And then what happens if I eat that bad thing, then I'm a bad person. And then what happens is that they hide to eat those foods. Like a lot of parents would tell me, like, I find food wrappers, in their room, because they're eating in hiding, like they're ashamed. And that's not the point. They can enjoy all foods, but it really is the responsibility of the parent. Like, maybe not getting ice cream every week, but maybe you can buy it once in a while, enjoy it whenever you buy it, perfectly fine. But really not hiding food, not giving it to the thinner sibling. That they would do that a lot. Like, he can eat it because he's thin, but and
I
it would
have
break my heart.
chills.
Yeah,
Oh, that
that would
breaks
break
my
my heart.
heart.
So I would tell the kids, like, weight, I wouldn't even mention weight, right? And all the information is really for the parent, not for the child.
Yes.
Parents can be responsible for everything. But yeah, just modeling those healthy behaviors, and like making mealtime a pleasurable experience that they feel comfortable. Telling you if they like something, didn't like something. And, when it comes to like picky eating, it's completely normal as long as we keep exposing them to those foods. It may take up to 15 times, I think it is. The research says that, for a kid to accept a food. So maybe don't get discouraged if they don't eat the broccoli the first time, right? Just keep offering. If they don't like it, you don't have to mention it. But yeah, just for them, it's really important to be forming those healthy habits and having a good relationship with food since little.
That is so interesting that you mentioned that. Of course, we know outside of food, including food, everything, a habit doesn't form from doing it once or twice, but being it offered even up to 50 times to have it is where it kind of can sink in. So that really does help. I hope everyone listening is like, okay, so we're in this for the long haul. If it's not, it's okay if it's not working right now. Keep going, keep exposing, keep it going, because yeah, absolutely. That again, I think that kind of lightens the load and lightens the burden a little bit of like, I'm clearly doing something wrong if I can't get my kid to eat green beans. And it's like, well, now they just might need to see it 50 times before they're even willing to give it a try. And then also too, like, I don't love every food in the world. My husband doesn't love every food in the world. Like, sometimes
Yeah,
kids, just humans, are not going to like a food, and that can also be okay. But then finding something else to get the nutrients and the balance can be the kind of the goal there then.
Exactly. Just offering it, maybe add a little bit of butter, and then next time offer it with something else. But keep offering it once in a while. But yeah, it can take like 10 to 15 times for them to accept it. And so don't give up. And there's gonna be some foods that you're never gonna like, and that's okay, right?
Yes.
As long as they're eating
Yes.
other vegetables, other fruits, they don't have to eat specifically those asparagus, for example.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. That's funny that if you don't mind another anecdote, I guess I'm going to keep bringing them in our conversation. But my husband, I'm going to use the word weird. He weirdly does not like potatoes, like kind of at all. I mean, he'll eat like a potato chip or really, really crispy, thin French fries. There are a number of foods I don't like either. And we work really hard to make sure that we never talk about like, no, mama's not going to have pickles because mama does like, we don't do that. We just like casual. And I don't like pickles, but so which could also be considered weird. And my son doesn't like mashed potatoes, and we worked so hard to never have him see that my husband doesn't like potatoes, and yet here he is also not. So I guess it's hereditary. I don't know, but
Yeah, as long as it's fine as long as he doesn't hear like, oh, you're like your dad that doesn't like
that's right.
potatoes, because then you put a label that, oh,
Uh-huh.
I don't like potatoes. Like my mom told me that I don't like potatoes. So then
Yes,
it's very hard for them to, try it later on because they're set. They already have a label, right?
that's right. Mashed potatoes are bad. That is actually what happened with my husband's younger brother. He's 3 years younger, and he heard Austin, my husband, saying like, "Oh, mashed potatoes are gross," or whatever. And he, to this day, sorry, Tyler, will not eat mashed potatoes because like it's in his brain. It's like it's
Yeah.
filed away, it's locked up, it's stored in the bad column, and that's really it.
Yes, yes. When they
Yeah,
hear something like, oh, he's just a picky eater, oh, he doesn't like this, then instead of saying, oh, he tried it once, was not a fan of it, but maybe he'll, like it someday, then they're open to that,
yes.
option. But if we're already saying they're hearing everything.
They
So
are. I wrote that down already about labeling the child, especially like calling a child obese. I do very much that I struggle with the idea, not working in your field, but I struggle with the idea of providers giving any, if much, information to the kiddos, except for like, hey, we're going to work on balancing the, trying new foods or whatever, but telling a child that they are obese and giving that label, the shame that goes along with that, the humiliation, even depending on who else is in the room or not. But and so once again, yeah, so we're already setting people up for failure if we're like, oh, they're a picky eater. Like, well, then what are they going to do but walk around the world saying like, I'm a picky eater, so therefore I either don't have to try that, or it's just natural for me to say no thank you because I'm a picky eater, because I've been told
yes,
that since I can remember. Yeah.
yes, believe everything we hear. They internalize it, and they're gonna have a harder time accepting foods if they're told that they're picky.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I thank you so much for that. Very good. I had a couple of more like comical questions for you at working in the field. Like, what is it with kids where you're like, the mashed potatoes are a great example for my daughter. She had them at Christmas at my parents' house, so we went and bought like so much mashed potato mix. I'm lazy. They taste fine. And so she was like really into mashed potatoes, and she was taking them down like a champion. And then like 3 days later, she was over mashed potatoes. Like, what is that with kids where they're just like, yes, this is the best thing I've ever had, and then it's like, no, I'm good. Never show me that again.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think again, it's completely normal, and they get tired of eating the same foods, I guess. Maybe they
Sure.
need a little break and they'll eat it again. I know that happened to me. I remember, I don't know why, growing up, I would like this like tomato sauce that my mom would make like for the spaghetti, and I would eat it. I would love it and eat a lot of it. And then all of a sudden, like, I don't want that tomato sauce.
Yeah.
Had it, and then eventually I tried it again. But maybe they get tired of the same food, like so close. I don't know. I'm not sure, but it's completely normal.
Yeah. I will say I do catch that, because especially when you do have a child who, not a picky eater, but one who perhaps at times had whatever, the appropriate way
Yeah.
of describing, and then they do find something and you get so excited. So you're like, eat all of this, you'll eat this. And then it's like, okay, I'm over it now. You've ruined it.
Yeah, yes. I know. It's sometimes with kids, I know as a parent, when they try something, we get excited, and we might be tempted. And I've done it, like, oh, good job. Yeah, it's yummy and all these things. And sometimes what I've read is that it's better sometimes not to say anything, to act indifferent. Like he ate a piece of broccoli when he never did, and you're all excited, and we just have to pretend that it's not a big deal, because then they're like, oh, I ate something, and there's a reaction. I don't know. We put a lot of feeling into that, and they
Yes.
either stop or they might not want to do it again, but not really like rewarding or anything when they eat something.
Yes.
Just pretending that you didn't notice. But
Yes. And I will acknowledge for myself that is tough, because you just get so excited. It's like
yeah,
it feels like a personal victory of some kind when your kids are eating. I don't know why that is. I mean, I think a lot of the things that we're describing really kind of bring us to that conclusion. And so it can be so difficult where it's like, oh my gosh, you ate that green bean. It's so yummy, right? You loved it, huh? Yes. Now you'll have to eat them. And it's like, shh,
yeah.
okay, everybody just relax. You're stressing
I
this
mean,
kid out.
yeah, it's gonna happen. I've done it, but I try not to. Or even like if my youngest is barely gonna start eating, but let's say if I had two toddlers, kind of like not comparing, like, hey, your brother, because we tend to do this a lot. Like he likes it.
Yes.
Why you eat it? And it's hard, but not doing it. But maybe we should like work on that and not really do it so often, or like comparing siblings. It's yeah,
Yes.
we've all done it, but maybe not try comparing like what they're eating and how much they're eating to their siblings.
Yes. I mean, I think that's a good one just from a mental health perspective as well, to try to not compare your children, but especially as with the eating in a specific case, that's also very, very helpful. Cause like, well, your brother's eating it. Well, what I'm not
Yes.
externally motivated by him eating broccoli for me to then eat broccoli. And also, again, you're kind of shaming me for not, yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good thing to keep in mind as well.
Yeah.
So I know like my son, not as much now. He's getting a little more diverse, but like especially when he was younger, I mean, I could have fed him just full cartons of berries over and over again, right? What are, I guess you kind of already touched on it, but just being a little more specific about like, is there a thing of like, yes, you can have more berries, but not until you eat your pork chop? Or like what does that kind of look like as a best practice generally?
Yeah, well, that happens to me all the time with my almost 2-year-old with berries, and they're so expensive.
Yes,
But
they are.
yes, so it's the berries. He asks for more berries when he has some meat or another protein and grains. He finishes the berries and wants more berries.
Mhm.
I really I just give him a second, a little bit more berries, and then try to direct him to the other foods, right? Like, okay, no more berries, because at this age, it's when they're little, it's hard for them to understand, like, no berries, what do you mean? Like, right, to understand, like, okay, you have to eat this other foods. But usually, I just give him a little more, and then no more berries. And, I try to direct them like, hey, why don't you try the egg? Why don't you try this? And then he forgets about the berries and starts eating if he's hungry. If not, I don't really force him. But yeah, that happens a lot. And I wouldn't, it depends on each parent. You don't want to withhold something that you have, and it's healthy. It's not like they're asking for,
Yeah.
chips or candy or something. So berries is fine. But yeah, my toddler does that a lot too.
Yes, yes, yes. I actually have a number of friends. We weirdly had like 5 boys all within the span of like 6 or 8 months or something. It was pretty wild. So I was very lucky to have that little village of people who would be like, "What's going on here? What is yours doing?" And it very seems to be a common theme for a number of people of like, man, you need to eat something besides the berries. But again, they're
Yeah.
not cookies, so fair enough.
Yeah, and you can vary the for example, one week you can buy pears and apples and other fruits, and not always the berries, so they can know, like, okay, there are no berries, there are other fruits. And maybe they get to try other foods more willingly, like try their proteins or whatever when they don't have the berries. But yeah, like not lying to them, but when you go grocery shopping, getting other fruits and present it on the plate, and they have pear and chicken and potatoes, for example. So they get to try other foods.
Wonderful. I love it. And another kind of funny one, but honestly, like, when do we panic? Like, what is the thing where it's like, oh my gosh, I've broken this child, DEFCON 1, shut it down. When do we panic? What is it, the thing that's like, I need help?
Yeah. Well, I think every parent knows when something is not completely right, like they have a gut feeling or they know they're not meeting their milestones. And we don't necessarily have to panic, but being proactive, right? Like, okay, he's already, let's say for a baby who's starting solids, like the baby's 8 months or 9 months, which I got to see in practice, like they were only, being breastfed. And I'm like, okay, it's already time to start solids. If the baby is not sitting up or don't have that good neck control or something, like they need to address that. Like, tell the pediatrician because maybe they need some therapy, maybe they were premature, other things. For an older child, maybe like if they're gagging or choking frequently, that's a red flag, like what's going on. If they're only chewing the food, a lot of my patients will tell me like my kid is like chewing the meat but not swallowing, they're just pocketing the food. That's another kind of like a red flag. Okay, maybe they're having trouble like oral motor skills, issues or swallowing problems. If they're have a very limited diet every day, that they only eat 5 things or like 3 things, then that's a red flag, of course. But selective eating, like picky eating, it's natural in kids. So, but the parent would be the one to know, like, okay, this is not like a regular picky eating where he sometimes eats chicken, sometimes not, and but he only wants berries and milk, and that would be kind of something to. I would recommend not waiting too long because seeking help or telling your pediatrician. I saw, for example, a kid that was 5 years or 4 years, already a toddler, but he didn't want to eat any solid foods that was not pureed, only pureed foods. Wow. So that for me was a red flag, and it took them a while to start some feeding therapy or some therapy. So for me, I would tell the parents like as soon as possible, don't wait too long, because then they're missing out on important skills and maybe they can get a little bit behind. But if you notice those problems and also like speech problems, those are like things to mention to your doctor, some kind of like red flags. But yeah, if the baby or the child is not eating, there may be some underlying issues. There's a lot of maybe trauma. Maybe they choked once and they became scared and they don't want to eat those foods. That I saw that a lot too. But maybe the parent didn't realize that was the problem. Like, oh yeah, they choked once. Maybe that's happening. Or there was some trauma or like family issues. Maybe they were going through a difficult time, a loss of a family member, a divorce, and they stopped eating. It doesn't have to do so much with like if they're hungry or not, but something psychological that it's happening.
Absolutely. And you're absolutely, I mean, I think any of us listening right now can think of a time where we were so stressed at work that we couldn't eat our lunch, or you can think of many other times. Again, in my situation, usually is the opposite, where it's I want to eat more for that dopamine hit. But absolutely. And so the same thing goes for our children who are tiny humans. So if you're recognizing that something is stressful in the environment, like you mentioned, like a divorce or a recent loss or something might be going on at school or whatever it might be, and recognizing like those are all kind of, everything is intertwined. The psychological, the motor skill of the actual chewing and swallowing, all of that, the feeling hungry or not feeling hungry, and keeping that in mind, that's really good. And I also love too that's what I like to tell people, like when people ask me like when should I start, like when do I know if I need therapy, like are you thinking about getting therapy? Go talk to a therapist, right? Like, so are you really genuinely, versus just like kind of the like, oh my gosh, this kid will not eat anything, but she's 8 months old, versus no, I have a gut feeling of like something is off, then going and don't wait too long and go in.
Yes, especially if they're not growing like they should be, they're falling off the growth chart, things like that, they're losing weight, like those are all red flags. But if the child is growing, healthy, happy, just like typical, picky eating, I think that's fine. But again, only the parent really knows child, and they can feel, if they feel something's wrong, then definitely talk to someone, to your pediatrician. Or get a second opinion, even if you feel like your pediatrician is like, oh, they'll grow out of it. Sometimes they don't. And if we wait too long, it's going to be harder for the child.
Yes.
So it's okay to get a second opinion if you feel like you're not being heard.
Yes. Reach out to your local registered dietitian even. Oh my gosh, I love that. Okay, well, that's so great. So of course, understanding that every person has a unique journey, what are some common themes that you've noticed in your work? What are kind of some of the takeaways that parents can hang on to, or the the things that you've learned over your time in the industry?
Well, I encourage the parents to always set that example for the kids, to kind of create those meal times that are pleasurable and not so stressful. To follow the division of responsibility that I talked about, the deciding the what, the when, and the where, and letting the kid decide the how much. That really takes a lot of the stress away. Being prepared and having resources, become more informed about initiating feeding, for example, or just nutrition. And yeah, just allowing your kid to grow, be happy, and not think of food as something that has a moral value, or not think about their weight in a negative way, but see food as something that's it's something that brings us together, to celebrate, to have happy times. So yeah, I would just encourage parents to don't get too stressed, but do get to know your child, their milestones, and talk to your provider whenever you do need help or think something might not be right.
Sure, sure. Amazing. Oh, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time. Like I said, I have been mentioning, I'm like, I'm going to have somebody on who's a dietitian, because this is just constantly the question of people, like the parenting stressors. There are many, they are varied, and they are all over the place, but the food component often comes back, and kind of even throughout the ages too. So it's such important work that you do. And I'm so grateful that you've been generous with your time to come on and share with our team here, like the kind of the hows and the wheres, and the it's okay. Let's respond. Let's be proactive, but don't panic. Yeah, so I know you're not terribly busy on social media, but I would love, I know that you have a couple of accounts I'd love for you to share with everyone so they can know where to find you.
Yes. So my Instagram is diabetes nutritionist, and I'm not very active, but I do have some information there. But I also share an account with my sister for more for kids. There's a lot of pictures of lunch boxes, so you can get ideas from there. And it's called Bambini Nutrition, so you can follow us too.
Amazing. Well, thank you again for your time. What a pleasure it has been. I'm so excited to get this one out in the world, because it's something that we all need to know more about. So thank you so much. And to the rest of the team, thanks for showing up today. Be curious, not judgmental.